There has been a major new advancement in building biohybrid robotics. This is where you take something that is biological, like growing muscle tissue or brain tissue, and combine it with a robot, and it gains special skills, including the capacity to learn, at least learn at a biological level. Neurons, after all, do remember the voltage that passes through them. You may ask, hey, why in the world would somebody want to make a living robot? Because we can, okay? That's the reason. There are other reasons, like testing medication, running experiments on a model of an animal rather than an animal, or a model of a person rather than a person. You may ask, are biohybrid robotics sentient? And that depends on who you ask. Sentience is broadly the capacity to have an experience. Some may say stuff like animals are not sentient because they're not really thinking about their experience. Others may say yes, and some researchers have classed the brain organoids as sentient. That does have a lot of controversy around it because it's anthropomorphizing lab-grown brains. They're tiny. They're not really fully functional. They're not having a thought, but they can play Pong. This research group made a biohybrid robot that has brain tissue, a skeleton of sorts, and muscle tissue, and can be controlled with just light. And they've learned an awful lot. But they have an onboard actuator that does not require a motor. A lot of the problems when creating biohybrid robotics is that you might have pieces of biological tissue in there, but you need to have some way to control it. And that's what these guys did. Now, this requires a lot of different moving parts, and I guess that is a pun, but they had to grow brain tissue, and they grew this out of motor neurons. Those are the neurons in your brain that move your muscles. Of course, they had to have something that they could move, so they also grew muscle tissue so they could connect them, and they 3D printed a skeleton. They then gave them a short leg and a long leg made out of that muscle tissue. We'll have a look at that. So here's our little crawler. It is biohybrid. It has muscle layers, it has skeletal layers, and it has a brain. They also genetically engineered the cells in that brain organoid so that it would respond to light. So light can then command the neurons to work and cause the crawler to move. And here's another diagram on the setup. Now, it did some pretty interesting things. They could shine light on it and it would move, but it wouldn't stop moving. It could continue crawling for about 20 minutes after the motor neurons were activated. The other cool thing about this is that, again, neurons are living dynamic systems, so they can get better at the task that they are doing the more that they practice it. And those muscles are, technically capable of improving. Now that they have a proof of concept, there's a few different things that they're going to want to do. They should give this a blood supply so those muscles and neurons can work more effectively. They may also want to give it more complex bodies and a more complex brain, because right now it is a model of motor neurons. There's a lot of things you can do with that, but not that many things. It's a great model system to test medication and model diseases. You might ask, is this a horrifying new state of consciousness? No, probably not. These are just motor neurons. It's no more conscious than a single motor neuron group is in your brain alone. Could something like this be conscious? Potentially, but we're a little ways away from that. I mean, honestly, if you can have a whole human brain made from the same cells that you could make a brain organoid from, I could imagine that you could eventually grow them large enough that they could really process information and might have the capacity to be conscious. But we are, again, a very, very long way from anything of that nature. But I could admire them, and I think they're kind of cute. I honestly think AI will be the path to real intelligence, but these are interesting model systems. When the robots rebel, I'll be the one to tell you about it. Follow for more.